Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Amanda Karishi. Welcome to Trouble at Taboo Junction, Author Conversations with Amanda Karishi. And I'm delighted to introduce Zachary Dillon.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is an
Zachary,
honor.
Dill Zachary Dillon is the author of I Hear You Watching, a psychological thriller based on his actual real life experiences with hearing voices. And he's also the author of a short story collection called People with Problems. Um, Zachary and I met on Substack. It is possible to meet people on Substack,
Here we are.
especially authors looking for readers and readers looking for books. I think he reached out to me first. I can't remember our initial interaction, but I do know for some reason I just decided to check out his page, see what he wrote, and I came across this book which caught my attention because I'd never quite seen anything like it. Um, he was writing about the experience of hearing voices, but not from the point of view of someone imagining what it was like, but from the point of view of a writer who knew what it was like because he actually experienced it. And I've little confession here. I have a sort of broad interest in psychiatry. I'm not a psychiatrist, um, but I've interacted with patients experiencing psychosis before,
Mhm.
and I didn't really, you know, interacting with someone isn't the same as really understanding it from their point of view. And I was I wanted the insight, and that's why I picked a book. So in our conversation, Zachary's going to be doing most of the talking. I promise you, Zachary. And we're going to be talking about his book. I Hear You Watching. He's going to be reading some extracts, but we'll also be talking a little bit about the writing experience and that experience of hearing voices as well. Yeah,
Yeah, wonderful.
yeah. Um, I want to say as well that I feel that it's a very brave book. It is a very brave book. Um, and what's brave about it isn't so much that he wrote it, but that he went as far as saying, he was open and vulnerable about the fact that it's based on his real experiences. And I say that because of all the taboo subjects out there, um, psychosis, hearing voices, stuff like that, it is really hard for people to talk about. It's hard for people to say, put their hand up and say this happened to me, because then there's this worry about how will people perceive me, will they trust me, is my reputation going to be shot forever? People feel ashamed sometimes to talk about it when it's happened to their loved ones. um it was a brave book. It's a brave book, and I have so much respect for you for putting it out there with the intention of helping other people. um Helping other people. And we were talking more about ways in which this book could be so helpful.
That
um
that means a lot
Great.
to hear.
Uh, Zachary is going to start by reading an extract.
Sure. Yeah.
And this extract is going to be, okay, I'll let you introduce it, Zachary. Go on.
Well, it depends on which subject you want to tackle first. We've got a few to. Do you want to just leap into the psychosis experience, and that's kind of
I
where
think
we're.
that's exactly where we should go. I
Let's
think
do it.
that's exactly where we should start. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So this just to set this up. This is a little bit into the book because it's a first person present tense kind of ramping up through this experience, and you're step by step experiencing it with the main character, Alex. Um, and uh, and as such, it doesn't start right away in the experience. It's sort of the frog that doesn't realize it's in a boiling pot.
Right.
Um, and so now this is a ways in when he's actually interacting with the voices, he's hearing them. Um, this is some of the references that they make in here refer to stuff in previous chapters. Like in the first chapter, he thinks that he was seen masturbating in his apartment by presumably his neighbor because he heard somebody comment on it while he was doing it. Um, so he's carrying this experience around. He also has this sense of loneliness and this embarrassment about sex that moves him to try to get out of his shell by joining a hookup site and sort of shake up that side of him. Um, and then as he starts hearing the voices commenting on things and criticizing him, he tries to get proof. He feels like he's being spied on, and stalked, and so he has borrowed a recorder from his a friend of his to try to catch the voices in the act. So that's the scene setting for this little bit. It starts with one of the voices talking, so we'll leap right in. Alex, we're live streaming you to viewers all over the world. You have no idea how much money we're making. You're a star. It's hard to keep my movements deliberate. I tell myself I don't hear them anymore. Most of them tune in when you're jerking off. Yeah, how about it, Alex? Feel like jerking off now? I'll make a poll in the chat. Then speaking slow as if while typing. Place your bets. Shit, piss, or jerk off. I shift my weight from one foot to the other and feel a sting at the tip of my penis. I have to pee, but doing so would look like giving in to their suggestion. They're kidding about the live stream. How is it happening anyway? If my computer and phone are turned off in the next room. The air is evening blue. The last claws of pale yellow scratch the neighbor's wall. Eventually it'll be too dark to see me. I sit on the couch, cross my legs, and light a fresh cigarette. I can probably hold it for another half hour. Be the rabbit, as still as the plastic grass and the colored eggs. Wait for everyone to get bored and go away. Alex, you got a message from a girl on that perv site. She's super hot. You want me to respond for you? Why are you spoiling the surprise? We didn't tell him we got into his email. Come on, he knows. He's not a total idiot, right, Alex? He knows we have his bank stuff, but do you think he realizes that access to his email means access to basically everything else? Everything else. Oh, someone just placed a bet that you jerk off in the bedroom instead. Now it's getting interesting. Will he go to the bathroom or the bedroom? I can't do either now. Actually, stay on the couch for a minute while these side bets come in. Oh my god, the chat is going fucking crazy. Who's gonna win, Alex? The beauty is we win no matter what. You're sitting on the fucking couch doing nothing, and no one can stop watching. Where's the camera? It hurts now. I won't make it 30 minutes. Alex, you wouldn't believe the money riding on these bets. Whatever you do, you'll make someone very happy. How did they get in to install the equipment? My apartment building is owned by an agency with other properties. To go out on a hypothetical limb, is it possible that my observers live next door in a house coincidentally also owned by that agency, which they work for or have connections to, and they used those connections to copy my key and sneak in while I wasn't home? Is this a new reality show? A slapdash web stream proof of concept? Will a guy with a head mic and a clipboard knock on the door and ask me to sign a release? I'll take the pen and sign his goddamn eyes. Alex, if you go to the bathroom right now, someone will win more money than you make in a month. It hurts to sit still and hurts even more to move. I could wait for my bladder to split and seep urine into my abdomen, and refusing to satisfy these motherfuckers will cost me my life. If there's a viewer out there with half a conscience, they could leak this to the press, and my neighbors would be arrested on counts of voyeurism, harassment, and manslaughter. Or proof of malicious intent could make it homicide. Mine would be the first case of its kind. Someone would play me in a movie reenacting this exact scene, and the realization would wash over the country that all our possessions have sprouted eyes and ears, that this could have happened to anyone. But I wouldn't get to see my observer's twisted empire burn to the ground because mine would be a martyr's death, the kindling of that revolutionary blaze.
Wow. Wow. Guys, guys, listeners, listen. This, imagine this, basically, this guy, Alex, has created a world. So like this almost reads, you're listening to it and it feels like it's real. He has created this complex world
Mhm.
that is terrifying him, that is dictating his actions, but it's all in his head, and he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And that is what psychosis is.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think I read it. It was my first ever novel that I read as a serial on Substack.
Hmm.
And while I was reading it, I was hoping that to a large extent you had kind of exaggerated things to make it a more interesting story.
Uh,
I didn't want to think that you had been that terrified.
yeah,
I mean, maybe it's obviously some of it is fictionalized, and we don't all need to know exactly what.
sure.
But how incredible that a human mind could create a terrifying world and lock itself in and be terrified by it,
Hmm.
and no one can get in, and it's difficult for anyone to persuade this human being that this is all in their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the crazy thing. Crazy. I shouldn't use that word. I'll use that word only in reference to myself. But the unimaginable thing, or the wild thing, let's say, about an experience like this is it's that fight or flight self-defense thing that happens. The walls go up, and anything that passes through becomes a potential threat, especially when you think that it's your privacy being invaded on such scale, and he's trying to put his fingers in all the holes in the dam, but he's just watching other trickles come in because he thinks in catastrophic terms. I mean, even what I noticed in looking at these, I always like get new perspective. I'm from having written this and then rereading things, and every time I realize something new about how my own mind works or doesn't, and the context of this experience, and in this particular example, it really shows, and there are other examples like this in the book, that even his delusions of grandeur are like self-defeating and and like blowing up in his face. Like he's like, well, I'll become, this big deal, but I'll be dead. Like he martyrs himself and says like I'll be this symbol of this revolution against, spy technology and whatever, and our intrusive social media and whatever, but I won't be here to revel in it. Um,
Yeah.
he's constantly pulling the rug out from under himself in literally every single way, even via the voices or via his imagination otherwise. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings me to another question. I mean, one of the discussions we had while I was going through the novel, reading the extracts week by week, one of the discussions you and I had was, it seemed that the things that Alex was coming up with, the things that his voices were generating for him,
mm,
were actually a reflection of his own anxieties.
yeah.
So, he was insecure, he had guilt issues,
Mhm.
um, and he was terrified of actually being a bad person. And then he had maybe an uneasy relationship with things like um, sex. He had an uneasy relationship with things like, you know, his relationship as a white person with black people. And because he had that uneasy relationship, his anxiety became manifested through these voices, like poking away at his insecurities.
Yeah.
And again, going back to my own experience interacting with people who had psychosis, though I had the suspicion that the way it manifests is going to be the unreality that you manifest is always going to be rooted somehow in your own realities.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
um, I remember a guy who was elderly, chronic schizophrenic, and he talked a lot about martial arts. And it's because when he was younger, that was one of the things he used to do. When he was well, so he
Yeah.
sort of brought that into his reality. So I want to ask you if you've had like exchanges with other people who've had that experience of hearing voices, and have you like sort of compared notes and found that what other people's minds conjure is radically different from yours, or do you find there a lot of common themes?
It's kind of all over the place. When it initially happened, so the book covers the main episode of when it was like at its worst up to the peak, and then a little bit of the starting to come down, and then the afterward sort of in the book describes my recovery subsequent to that because it took several years of sort of cognitive behavioral exercise exposure stuff, things like that, kind of trying to get out of my head. Um, and that was when, like when I was still living in LA, where it happened, I wanted to join a group and talk to people about who had similar experiences, partially because like if I can be honest, partially just because I'm a writer and I'm curious about other people's experiences, and this was kind of a great excuse
Yeah.
to absorb stuff, like real stuff. And I also had something to contribute. I didn't feel like somebody just going, as if it was some kind of a show for me. It was, I could participate and there could be a real exchange. So I was kind of excited about that. And when I looked up groups, I don't know if I searched for the wrong stuff, and the wrong keywords, but the only thing that came up was one group in Big Bear, which is like a mountain town a couple hours north of LA, and nothing in the city. And I
Mm.
was like, you can't tell me I'm the only person in LA who hears voices. There's no way. That's not a thing. I think I'm the only one who's admitting it, I guess. Um, so it didn't really work out that way. I didn't get that until later. I found a couple of Facebook groups that are affiliated with Intervoice and Hearing Voices Network, that are helpful, that are people on there who it was nice to have that you're not alone experience. But I also will say that a lot of those groups, there are differences that still made me feel a little bit outside, not to their fault, but it was a lot of people with schizophrenia diagnoses or who had been battling this for years, or like this has just been a fact of their life since childhood. Um, and that wasn't the case for me because by the time I found these groups, I was basically out of the woods for myself, and still looking to sort of share this experience that I had and learn about other people's and how they dealt with it because I kind of had to make up my own prescriptions. There was a little bit of meds at the beginning that I don't feel like worked really well because I think a lot of my own experience arose from my personality and my own thoughts and habits and stuff, as opposed to it being a chemical diagnosis. Maybe that was part of it. In my case. But so there was a difference there, and a lot of the stuff that people talk about there's like mine has certain cliches. My experience of it being, well, maybe this is a government test or some kind of thing. I'm being studied or I'm being stalked. Then there are people in these groups who are sharing or who even just show signs of it being, a demonic belief in demonic
Mhm.
influences. There's a lot of religious talk. There's a lot of, um, there's some people who are like, I've just had this, love-hate relationship with my neighbor's dog who has been telling me he's going to murder me and my family for years, and I
Mm.
know that it's not real, but every once in a while when I, pull an all-nighter or something, it gets bad and he starts sending me death threats through our microwave or something. And
Wow.
it sounds like something I'm just making up to make somebody sound silly, but
No.
there is a lot of stuff out there where you realize how malleable our reality is.
Hmm.
Because I'm not saying that to put this person down. I also disconnected my smoke detector and talked to it for a while because I thought that's how they were talking. Like we had certain similarities and we did exchange about this kind of stuff. Um, and then there are other people who it made me wonder why they were in the group because they kept insisting that it had nothing to do with them or their perception or a diagnosis. It had everything to do with we're being targeted. And there's actually a phrase, a targeted individual, um, they call themselves. And basically a similar situation to me where they're like, I was just going about my life and minding my own business, and then all of a sudden they started watching me from satellites, and
Right.
now I've bought a lead blanket from a dentistry supply store, and I wear it when I'm at home to block the rays, and they can't find me, and I really wish they would stop. And they gather together and have meetings and protests and things like that because they feel like this is some kind of an MK Ultra psyop thing that is just being covered up. It's a conspiracy.
So do the lead blankets work?
Yeah, well,
For
it's a
them, does it work
fascinating
for them?
it's a fascinating
Yeah.
question because that whole defeatist thing and that pattern of thinking in Alex's experience and my
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
um, is, oh, I'll get him this time. This is going to be a perfect
And
plan.
then it doesn't work.
And it does work at first, and then
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
they
oh,
override it. They always find a way to override it.
they
Yeah.
figured some way. And so there was this, I remember watching a documentary about targeted individuals. It's on YouTube. I think it's on the Real Stories channel or something. It's in the UK,
Mhm.
this documentary. And there's actually a lot more study and discussion of hearing voices in and outside of diagnosis of schizophrenia and other related issues and stuff. But the phenomenon of hearing voices on its own, um, as a part or individual from these experiences, is being talked about a lot more and studied in the UK than it is in the States. It's more and more, but it's the UK is kind of really where a lot of those places, those institutions are based. And this documentary, the person that example is lifted from the documentary, and they build all kinds of boxes and whatever, and cover them with lead blankets and things like that. And it works for a while, and then it's like they found me again. They reconfigured their satellites, and here they are. And
I
it's exhausted. I'm exhausted for them watching because I know exactly how that feels. Not to the extent that they've had to deal with it,
experienced it.
because
Yeah.
for them it's been possibly lifelong. But it's
And
just
I'm really glad you brought this up. I'm glad you took the conversation in this direction because um a few minutes ago I used the word schizophrenia or
sure.
schizophrenia. And it occurred to me that you and I have talked about your experience. I've read your book, but a lot of our listeners may not. And I just want to make that distinction. Even though hearing voices comes with schizophrenia, a lot of people hear voices who don't have schizophrenia. And
Yeah.
Zachary's one of them. So we're not saying, we want to be careful with labels, and we want to be careful with um what's that word? When we I'll forget the word, it'll come when it
Like
comes.
armchair diagnosis or something, or like a
No, I'm not going in that direction. I know there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of
oh
stigma
sure.
attached to hearing voices, and there's even more stigma attached to out and out schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Um, and while it's a condition that some people live with, and that's a fact, um, Zachary's experience was different because he had hearing voices as an isolated symptom.
Mhm.
And if I'm correct, it was really bad for a few months, and then it took you a few years to really like work yourself into a more healthy place. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it took several. It was like the initial episode, the come up, until sort of it started to turn around was several months. And then after that, it was like because that moment, the moment when it sort of peaked was somebody suggested, and I say somebody, it was my who is now my wife, suggested, thank God stuck around through this whole thing. That was an adventure for her. We were long distance at the time, and so for her to just be getting these dispatches and video calls and stuff where I'm like, the neighbors are at it again. It's like it's wild. But um she was the one who suggested, have you ever considered maybe it's in your head and
Mhm.
maybe you're just imagining this? And it hurt to hear that. And there was a little bit of me that was like, how dare you? um you're not the one who stayed up all night talking to the smoke detector. Like, I know, I'm here, I can hear them. um but and then after, and what I'm getting at is when she said that and I started to come around to that idea, it's not like a light switch because it's a belief system now that I had built up. And it was a self-defense mechanism that now anytime anything would, trigger it in the slightest, it would start, the radio would get turned up in my head. Um, and so I had to recognize that and start deprogramming myself in a sense, So that was the part that took years. Yeah. So it was years of recovery and sort of deprogramming of myself from myself. And yeah, the initial experience was several months. And yeah, it didn't come with a diagnosis because I did see a psychiatrist, and at the time I was old. I was like aged out of the window of when it could have been
Right.
schizophrenia or what they
Yeah.
would consider. I was a bit too old for that, and I wasn't exhibiting other symptoms
Hmm.
that would match. And so, yeah, exactly like you said, there's a lot of people who have this experience who, partially because of the stigma of, oh, I don't want to think that I'm schizophrenic or get diagnosed
Yeah.
schizophrenic, and a lot of people with schizophrenia are stigmatized and treated poorly, and people don't trust them, and all of this terrible stuff that comes with it that makes people with or without that issue hesitant to talk about it or seek help or that kind of thing, and it makes it really tricky. Also, I've heard from professionals that it's kind of used as like a catch-all in some ways because a lot about it is so kind of mysterious and has so many different moving parts and factors that a lot of times the that diagnosis, the schizophrenia diagnosis is an umbrella to catch a lot of different stuff that kind of, well, you have this and this, so this must be this kind of thing. And so
Hmm.
it's still kind of a gray area and tough to define. It's a
Well,
blanket.
um, because mental health, unlike things like, say, cancer, isn't really something you can visualize physically. You know, you can
Yeah.
take out a cancer and you can look at it and the pathologist can examine it. I think we are still relatively early in our exploration of fully understanding the brain. So we've come a long way in understanding ADHD and understanding depression and understanding that you have like an umbrella of depression, but then you have, like, if you want to call them subtypes, different pathways, and therefore different treatments apply. And psychosis is a very, very broad umbrella term. I mean, you can take some drugs and you can have a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
You can have a psychotic episode because you've got a high fever, you've got sepsis, you're suffering delirium, your blood sugar's extremely high. So psychosis is a very, very broad umbrella term, and um unfortunately, psychiatric terms are bandied about very, very casually in such a way that, on one hand, it increases stigma, but also it sometimes dilutes the meaning of the word.
Right.
Like, we talk about someone, sometimes people talk about someone being schizo or schizophrenic, and what they really mean is that they seem to have two sharply different ways of being in the world. They have maybe one personality for one group of people and a different personality for another group of people. And of course, that's not what schizophrenia means.
Yeah.
It's very, very specific. Um, and I noticed one of the things you did, I think, which was really, really wise in writing your novel, in talking about it and getting out there. You actually do the opposite of what I'm doing now. You stay away from these medical terms to a large extent.
Yeah,
And
sure.
and I think what that does is it says everybody's welcome. It
Yeah.
says this isn't a place of stigma, this is a place of safety. Read, enjoy, understand.
Wow.
And it's
That's
wise, it's
beautiful.
wise. And you kind of um make that distinction. Um and that's really good. And I feel like, I think because I have a medical background, which we may or may not have discussed, I think
Oh,
I've
yeah.
maybe feel a little bit of responsibilities to maybe talk about these terms and create a little bit of clarity. And it occurred to me as I was preparing for this session that maybe one of the reasons the word that psychosis makes people so uncomfortable is because we have that common use of another term, which is similar but completely different, and that word is psycho.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So we
Right.
use psycho very casually to talk about somebody maybe who's very angry,
Yeah.
maybe someone who's very violent,
Yeah.
maybe someone who really can't be trusted because they're so erratic.
Yeah.
And then you've got the word psychopath, which again doesn't mean psychosis at all. A psychopath may have zero psychosis
Mhm.
because a psychopath is someone with no empathy. Their brain is wired differently. They don't have empathy. They don't feel fear. or distress the same way most of us do, and that sort of unchains them from normal social behavior. You
Right.
know,
And then they become very successful politicians.
some of them do.
Yeah.
Some of them do because they don't have those inhibitions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So just for those who maybe would like at this point a definition of psychosis, I looked up the National Health Service's definition.
Yeah,
And
sure.
it's very simply, psychosis is when people lose some contact with reality. That may involve seeing or hearing things that other people cannot see or hear, known as hallucinations, and believing things that are not actually true, what we call delusions.
Mhm.
And that may also involve confused and disordered thinking and speaking.
Mhm.
So it's a very, very broad term. And as Zachary shared with us, he had one of those symptoms, but just that one symptom actually disordered his life.
Yeah.
And then he started to exhibit confused thinking and speaking, not confused to himself, but to other people. It would have been, you would have come across as someone who's a little bit unhinged.
I did. I did. It's not I would have. I
Yeah.
definitely had those
Yeah, and
moments.
and again, it takes so much courage to talk about this, and I just wanted to say I really truly admire that, and I don't know, most of us I think don't can't say with confidence that if we'd been through what you've been through, that we'd be sitting in the public space on a podcast, putting our story on the internet, putting our face to the name and to the story. It's very brave of you, and I think, what was your motivation for writing this book? That brings me to that story. What was your motivation? And for persevering and making sure the book actually got out there, it got to the finish, it got published, and then you spend all this time trying to get it to readers, putting in the hard miles of marketing in a very busy
Well,
marketplace.
thank you. First of all, thank you. That's really sweet of you to say all this about it being so brave. I really
It's all
that
true.
feeds into this question, my answer to this question, because I have to confess the reason for writing and pushing it out into the world also is not entirely selfless. There is a lot about it that I think is really important to talk about, and I don't think of myself as I have strong opinions about stuff, but I don't consider myself an activist in any way. I don't know how I could go about things. I see a lot of stuff that I don't like happening, and I want to do something about it. But I'm also somebody who, when things get too big, um, I can make mountains out of molehills very easily, and a lot of things feel impenetrable or like I couldn't scale that problem. But this was something that was sort of handed to me as something that I could do, as they say, start locally, start with yourself and those around you. So my thing is to write this and share this story that I experienced that hopefully would help stop some kind of stigma, start conversations, that kind of thing. But when I initially sat down, I didn't have all of that grandiose stuff in mind. I was basically until then, failed novelist. Um, for a long time, I had dreams of writing a novel. I had planned, even in elementary school, I had notebooks where I wrote the first 3 pages of something that was going to fill the notebook, and then the rest of it is blank. Um, and uh, and I actually had been writing something for 9 years before this that I thought was going to be this cool, surreal, sort of sci-fi kind of a thing, absurdist thing that I told everybody about when I'd meet people or hang out with my friends or whatever. And I just talked it to death and never actually wrote much. For not after 9 years, I had 40 pages to show for it that weren't very good. They were overwritten. I still didn't know who the characters were. And I kept telling myself every year, I'm gonna finish that this year. This is still gonna be my first novel. My birthday is January 1st. I'm gonna start on October 1st, and I'm gonna write for those 3 months, 1,000 words a day. And by my birthday, I'm gonna have a finished draft. And in 2019, October 1st, I sat down and I wrote 2,000 words on that novel, the other one. That was great. Second day, I wrote like 400. And I was like, that's okay. I did more the previous day. The third day, I just kind of tweaked the previous days. And then I didn't do anything after that. And I think it was October 6th where I was like, this experience had happened um, in 2013.
Uh-huh.
And I'd been carrying it around. And once it happened, I had never planned on. I'm always more interested in escaping into something else and exploring something else and my feelings and perspective and other people's perspectives in other places because I'm a homebody, I'm kind of an introvert, that kind of thing. So I kind of escape through that, and I love sublime ideas and imagery, and I feel like the psychedelia of our everyday experiences and stuff like that, and the way that it can bend into, cartoon logic and stuff, I think is really fascinating. I love absurdist fiction
Right?
and stuff like that. Um, and so this was the first story that came along where I was like, oh, I can write something about something that happened to me and still achieve that other goal and still get my fix. And and so I on like October 5th or 6th of that year, I sat down and just wrote the first 1,500 words or something of what would become this. Um, and I wrote 1,000 words a day. I didn't finish by my birthday, but by then I had momentum where it
Yeah,
wasn't 1,000 words every time, but sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less, and it always balanced out. And so it was really just the momentum of starting fresh, pushing all that stuff off the
yeah,
table, saying, I'm going to tell this other thing. I always thought of myself as somebody who discovers it as I go, which is true. But that also kept me from making any outlines for any previous work. And this one, I have to confess, I didn't make an outline, but because it actually happened, there was an outline. There was a chronology. So I always sat down knowing wherever I am now, I can moodle around here for a little bit, but I know that I eventually have to get to this because this is the next thing that really has to happen. This is the next real benchmark. And that's part of what kept me going. And there was kind of an outline that I could climb on. Um, and I finished a while after my birthday, and I was like, holy shit,
you
it's
did it.
106,000 words. And it's like I printed it out for myself, and it was heavy, and I put it on the
Wow.
shelf, and I
Yeah.
let it sit there for a few months, and I'm going to get back to it and, do my edits and then send it to agents or whatever. And then I read it, and it was horrible. It didn't make any sense. Um, there's a little bit that kind of carried through and some things that made it to the end.
Hmm.
Um, but that was such a freeing thing where pushing that previous 9 years heavy thing off the table and then doing this in 4 months essentially proved that I could do it and it didn't have to take another 9 years. I always thought I was one of those writers who it takes a week to write a sentence or something, which is it's not silly for everybody. It was silly for me though. Um, and it's in iteration and just getting it onto the page. And I also kept it a secret. That
Hmm.
was another thing that helped. I even my wife knew that I was writing a book, and she knew that it was this book. She knew what it was about, but I didn't tell her anything. I didn't show her any pages or anything. Um, and it wasn't out of superstition or feeling like anybody's going to steal my ideas or something. It was really because I that takes the wind out of my own sails. And if I tell somebody about something and they say, "Oh, what a cool idea. Oh man, that's awesome. Show me when it's done."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Great. I came up with a cool idea." Like, and then it's done. And then I don't have to do anything else. But if I keep it a secret, then the only way anybody's going to see this thing is if I finish it. And that kept me going. That was the carrot for the next. I showed my wife at the end of the third draft. She was when she finally read it.
Right. Does
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, you finish, finish.
And sorry, this is a long meandering thing. You can see what my first drafts are like.
Yeah.
Is basically where they were going. But I,
Um,
but I, it was the impetus was finish a first novel. I had an outline because it was an experience that actually happened. And then I could, any of the little tendrils and stuff gave me that like psychedelic exploration kind of a thing to do. But it was also translating something that had already happened. I didn't feel like I had to make it up.
Right.
Um, and then the bonus, it was the bonus after that was that I had written something that conveys something so personal that people then read it. I'm kind of still surprised by how strong people's reactions to it are. The phrase that gets thrown around the most about this book is brutally honest.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yes. Yes.
it's cool. It's an
Yeah.
honor to hear, because I didn't sit down saying I'm going to be brutally honest. I
Right.
was just describing exactly what it felt like because it was fun to explore that from a remove like that, you know. And I wanted to finish that other book because I thought I wasn't going to be good enough for this book.
Hmm.
I wanted to practice with another book. And then writing this book made me realize, oh, every book is like the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. So that does bring me to another question, which is, um, for a novel to work,
Yeah.
there must be some structure, and I think even the books that seem to break the structure, if you examine carefully, it's there.
Yeah.
So did you find that, like with the first draft, when it was finished, is it that you had to maybe, what did you have to change to get the structure? Or was the structure actually there and it's just the writing that you had to work on?
Some of it was there is some stuff because with the first draft, I didn't know how much of it I wanted to um how much I wanted to veer from the experience, it's the concrete factual experience
Yeah.
itself, or keep. Also, those first two drafts and maybe a half, I think I finally realized it had to be in first person present tense,
Hmm.
whereas the previous drafts I had written in it was first person but past tense, um, and which created a problem because then it's past tense, which the book has already happened, the experiences have already happened. So then you're dealing with the how do I introduce this? How does this book end? And if he's describing this stuff that already happened, that means he must have done some thought or consideration or analysis on
Right.
his own.
So it
So
feels less
he's
immediate.
commenting. Yeah.
To put him to keep it in the moment, you had to do it in the present tense.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
inevitably he would be commenting on his own behavior at a
Yeah.
remove.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whether he still believes that he's being persecuted or he believes that but he would have to necessarily he can't make you wait 300 pages before like find out what I think about this.
Well, I mean, he could, but I think he made the right choice in
Yeah,
terms of what works better.
it would be unsatisfying. I had one framing thing where it starts out like, one of those old horror stories where it's like, you've found this under the floorboards of my old apartment, and if you're reading this, I've, disappeared or whatever, like, that kind of thing. I was right, I always suspected or whatever.
Yeah.
Which fine. Um, but so that was something that changed a little bit. And then I realized I like leaned more into factual stuff as I realized I didn't have to make up so much stuff in the earlier drafts. Because I was still kind of stuck on metaphors. I was really kind of florid writer before that, which is why
Okay.
my earlier stuff didn't go anywhere because I was kind of preoccupied by
Beautiful writing.
language. Yeah, the language, and I would always use like three metaphors at the same time, and it's like a this, or as if this, or maybe this. It's like that's God, oh
It's
man.
fine, but I think every book has to be what it needs to be. And maybe you
Yeah.
realized in writing this book that it didn't need that.
Yeah, some people can pull that off. I
Yeah.
can't. I need
Okay.
to
All right. Fair.
it's stronger if I focus on one thing because then
Yeah.
it just really it becomes brutally honest.
Yeah.
Um,
And nonetheless, there is some beautiful and interesting writing in what in I Hear You Watching.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's
There
other yeah, there's some turns that I am proud of
yeah.
now. There's stuff that I can see where I've kind of grown past little bits and stuff because I think that's inevitable, but there is stuff that I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't change, which
Well,
is
yeah.
nice. It's a good
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. And our listeners are going to have to get your book to discover that for themselves. But you used a phrase there, brutally honest, and definitely I'm going to ask you now to read an extract which illustrates a little bit of Alex's discomfort with his race relations as an individual
Sure.
with people of color, maybe generally, or maybe Black people specifically.
Mm.
And I like that brutally honest segue because what I felt about the scenes in where you wrote about Alex and what's going on in his mind in his relationship with Lily, um, I felt there was an honesty and a vulnerability to it. And I think in a way you set yourself up for doing nothing else because if you're going to sincerely convey what's in this guy's head, there's
Yeah.
no filter, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so I'd love for you now to read an extract that you've selected on this subject,
Sure.
and let's yeah,
Um,
let's hear that and we'll talk
as
about it.
as viewers can probably infer from this introduction, there is some, it's his inner monologue. There is some language and stuff that is a little extreme. So if you're watching this without headphones and with other people around who may be surprised by things,
Yeah,
just be warned. Because that's the beauty of a book is often it ha just happens in your own head and nobody
yes.
has to know, but we are speaking out loud right now. Um, so this is after he's joined the hookup website to get out of his own shell. He has had some interactions leading up to this now, and this woman Lily reaches out to him, and they have this wonderful banter that sort of sparks his interest and evidently hers. Um, and then at the end of their online interaction, she sends a picture, and he's surprised to realize because her profile doesn't have a picture on it. And he's surprised to realize that she's black. It strikes him not only that she has reached out to him sort of across this imaginary aisle, and then he feels gross about having thought of it that way. And he has all of this like wash over him of why does this feel different or weird? It shouldn't, or am I overthinking this? Or so, of course, given his mind, he sort of spins out on this. Um, this and they've planned on their first date is going to be at his apartment, and that's about to happen here. This is the lead up. She requested white wine, so I bought some on my way home yesterday. Then I realized that even her name connotes lilies and lily white. Maybe she prefers everything white. I find myself glaring at the bottle or averting my eyes when I open the fridge. In my profile photo, I'm wearing the Robert Johnson t-shirt. Robert Johnson was black. Two of the three prostitutes who've messaged me their prices were black. The woman seeking a husband was fairer skinned, but from Madagascar. Had these women read my shirt as a coded indication of preference? It's racist to think so. I should sleep. I smoke a bowl and listen to the foil crackle and cars pass outside. I feel strange looking at her picture. Her eyes stare back, daring me not to think of this as some kind of new experience. Of course, it's really me staring from her eyes, daring myself. I look at her picture long enough to remember it clearly, then I lie in bed and imagine a scene in which we have sex. It's a dress rehearsal to prove I can go through the motions without saying or doing anything stupid. It's ridiculous, like steeling myself against walking into a grocery store and shouting cunt or faggot at the top of my lungs, something I've never done. But in a grocery store, I don't have to say anything. Conversely, time with Lily will be one-on-one, and whenever she isn't speaking, it'll be my turn to say something, and each one of those moments will be a chance for me to slip. My brain outdoes itself conjuring such scenarios. They start innocently with her knocking. Then I open the next I say, "You can start with the dishes." My eyes clench tighter with each of these purges. I never get hard. The buzzing warmth I cultivated looking at her picture dissipates. I finally let go because touching myself during this ugly montage feels like a desensitization exercise. Still, I'm determined to see one go right, so I restart the scene. But now I ignore her knocks and leave her waiting at the door while I listen from the other side. A neighbor asks what she's doing here. She mentions my name, but the neighbor doesn't recognize it because I don't know any of my neighbors by name. They assume she's lying and came to rob the place. I hear the scene escalate and do nothing to intervene until the police are called and she's taken away in handcuffs. Or they shoot her, strangle her, or beat her to death. These scenarios are coming from somewhere in my mind. It's my fault they're happening. When I try to end them, they get worse. Am I about to spend the evening swallowing back insults and slurs like stomach acid burps rising from my subconscious? Are these the thoughts of a good person?
Wow. Um, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't I didn't re I know you kind of warned me, but I didn't double check what you were going to read,
Oh, I'm sorry.
even though I had read it before.
I told you yeah.
Yeah, you did tell me. I should have checked it.
Yeah.
That um wow. Yeah, so it is, I think the only word for that is it is so loaded.
Yeah.
It is really, really, really loaded.
Yes, it is.
And I feel like on another level, it was also a very vulnerable thing for you to write because it opens you as a writer up to so many accusations. And I question if you had been traditionally published, if that would have made it into the book.
Yeah, me too. I won.
I don't think it would have.
No, I don't think so
I
either.
don't think it would have because I mean, as a person of color, um, reading that, what you're bringing up for me is a reminder that at the most innocent level, because there is some degree of social segregation in a country like the United States,
Yeah.
um, Black and white people, some of them, maybe not all of them, have a discomfort with the other. And
Yeah.
you do hear it in ordinary conversation. Sometimes Black person will say they were in this room or they were in this meeting and everybody else was white, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I was in this meeting and everyone else was Black and this is what they were talking about and I felt so uncomfortable. And, you know, you're reminding us in this extract, one, that we unfortunately we don't always see each other as humans and the skin color is incidental. Sometimes the skin color comes with a whole bunch of social baggage
Mhm.
and in this case, Alex is in a bad place where all his anxieties and fears are coming to the fore. And you're also getting this sense of um, the hypersexualization of the Black person.
Mhm.
So there's that objectification of a Black person, and that's true for Black women. It's true for Black men. That can come from the white gaze, and so what you've written there is so loaded on so many levels, and at the same time you're not being blasé with it because you are not a racist person and neither is Alex, but you're still writing about these very racist connotations. And it's Alex has this fear that deep down he's racist. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, was it easy and natural to write this? Did you write this as some kind of warrior? I'm going to write this crazy stuff because people need to be honest about the stuff that goes on in people's heads and the state of our country. Or I mean, was it for you? Was it you? Were you being ambitious in writing it? What were you trying to achieve? It's yeah.
Well, I let me say first of all that I apologize for that. Like I should have been more specific. I did think that you were looking at these passages that I selected and stuff because I specified, but I should have been a little clearer.
That's my bad. I've just
We,
had a busy
no, no,
weekend.
no, it's okay because
And
here's
I
because
gave you the free rein. I said, you pick something because my thinking is you're going to pick something you're going to feel and you're going to be comfortable talking about. So
well,
you've read it, so I hope you're going to be comfortable
I,
talking about it.
I'll be honest with you, leading up to this call, that was the thing. I wasn't nervous about anything else because I know that our exchanges have been wonderful leading up to this point. I
Yes.
wasn't worried about talking to you.
Yeah.
I was uncomfortable with knowing that that was potentially going to happen. And then you gave me the green light when I said, "How about, these pieces?" And I don't want to put it completely on you either. It was my choice.
Yes.
Um, but
Because you're a
I
brave guy. I mean,
well, I'm working on it, and then
that's
I
brave slash reckless. When people
yeah
tell me I'm brave, I tell them, look, I've just got a reckless streak, okay?
I yeah, I like career suicide, let's say. It's
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
no, it's but this is an interesting thing to be able to talk about this specifically also because there was a worry about if I were to be more specific about, and remember, this is the passage in which this happens, and these words are said in this whole thing, I was worried that it would feel like I was like asking you permission to then say this, which is a crazy thing, not necessarily because this is your podcast, because this is your deal. You do have this final say. And who am I to come in here and just start throwing this stuff around? But at the same time, I didn't want to make it seem like, well, Amanda said specifically, yeah, it's okay. So now I've got the green light. She represents everybody. Like, and that's a weird,
Oh
that's
yeah, 100%. You don't represent everybody. I don't
right.
represent everybody. You
Yeah.
represent you, I represent me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So
Right.
I didn't answer your question though. I
Yeah.
did want to get to that, but I thought that was an interesting, the discomfort that has not gone away from putting the words on paper and being like,
Yeah.
wow, got that out of my system.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it wasn't out of some, like I said, this activist motivation or any kind of, honestly, I was worried about putting it in. That's the thing that kind of scared me the most to put in there. There's a lot of ugly stuff in there. There's a lot of really personal stuff in there.
Mhm.
The sexual stuff gets graphic, but in a weird way where it's like
Yeah.
it's not lustful and it's not sexy and it's not
Mm.
necessarily fetishistic. It's really animal and like an alien studying human sexuality in a way that's like, you know, it's and maybe you disagree, but that's how I have perceived it in
I think
writing.
because it's animal, it's relatable.
Sure, that's true too. But I
Um,
but I'm
yeah.
but I'm
Because
coming
that's
at it
mhm.
in an angle where maybe it's not everything is said kind of blatantly in that way where it doesn't necessarily it's not a turn on or it's not a that's not what
Yeah,
it's for.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think sex is a lot of times serves that purpose. And it's not even explicitly to disgust. It's just some of it is to disgust, but and so the racial content was a similar thing too, where it that relationship with Lily had happened previously about a year before the Voices experience. So it wasn't part of this experience itself. Because at the time I was in my long distance relationship with my who is now my wife,
Yeah,
um, who is white. But at the time when I had the Voices experience, the racial component was a big part because you just walk down the street and everybody's there, and you could be perceived in some way if you're walking a certain way or wearing a certain t-shirt or whatever. I would say something that could be misconstrued or whatever, and I was constantly in this zone of, well, these voices are observing and recording everything that I
right,
say. Is there a way, everything I did or said, I would think, is there some way that this could be used against me? Um, and inevitably, a lot of that has to do, especially because race is such a huge, hot issue in the States and has been for now centuries since well, it's before its inception. Um, it's it's one of those things, those dreaded things where Alex feels like a sheep in wolf's clothing, where he knows that he doesn't mean anything
right.
mean by it. And you say that he's not a racist, And that is, I would say, generous of you to say, I don't, it depends on what your definition is, I think. Because he doesn't mean anything in a hateful way. None of what he thinks does anything to denigrate her and or anybody else, but it is, they are uncharitable thoughts, and they do come from him. They were put there by something else, I would probably say.
Right.
Maybe there's an argument to be made, but I think he's as you say, it's cultural baggage, and I think he's just aware of the weight, and he's afraid that he'll either succumb to that weight and make some kind of a slip up, or he'll, try to overcompensate and make some other, terrible faux pas. Um, and I had a thought a second ago where I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? It's sorry, I was trying to,
No, well, maybe I'll come back to you, but
yeah.
what you're saying is leading me to, some other observations.
Mm,
You said that this incident, this situation of hearing voices happened to you around 2013.
yeah,
Right. And what's fascinating is now, how many years later? 12 years later, all of us are living in a world that is so much more like Alex's imagined world.
yeah,
Because between social media and other forms of hypersurveillance, like basically through social media, the way the world has changed since 2013. One, we're surveilling each other a lot more.
yeah.
We're screenshotting things we don't like. We are, saving clips for future reference when it gets deleted to use against each other. Now, you and I
Like
are not
this
doing
was
these
7 minutes ago. No.
you and I are not doing these things. You and I are not doing these things, right?
No.
And now you've given me some work to do. I said I didn't want to have to do any editing. I have to edit that
Yeah,
word.
of course, of course.
Because, if it was just a Trinidadian audience, it might have been cool. But, um,
Yeah,
you know,
these things have to be
like
considered.
the N word carries a certain amount of weight in the US, and the Black American experience and the Black British experience. It's so different.
Yeah.
Um, from say the Black Caribbean experience.
Mhm.
And I and as they say, the medium is the message. So a word in a book that we read is somehow still different from a word that comes across um to us on video,
Yeah,
audio.
right.
So it's now I think now I'm losing track. So we talked about what you're saying. What you're saying just now reminded me that the world that we're living in now is a bit more like the crazy world in Alex's head
Yeah.
um 13 years ago, because we are literally living in an increasingly surveillance state,
Well, and you actually, that was
especially in the
exactly
United
the
States.
thought that I lost. Yeah, especially in
Yeah.
the United States. The thought that I was getting
But
to,
you were getting to that.
as I was as I was talking to that about that,
I'm in your head. I'm
I
in your
put a pin. I
head.
put a pin. Hey, great though, because you're picking up what I'm dropping. It's
We're working together.
yeah. But the
Yeah.
thing that I was going to say after that is the fascinating thing is that that happened in 2013, and that was before Me Too. That was before the 2020 and the George Floyd protests and all of that stuff blew up. Not that that wasn't happening before, but there was a huge explosion and everything during the pandemic, and this whole the battles in the street and all that stuff. And all of that stuff, like you said, became louder, and became there was a lot of stuff that was seething under the surface that all of a sudden was just erupting more and more. And
Mm.
still, I mean, it's just I don't I'm waiting for the day where we start to figure this stuff out. And I know people are doing amazing work and some progress is being made in some places, but it's tough on a general scale. It's hard to it's really hard to watch. And I say that as somebody with the privilege of it. I'm not a target in
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah.
So it's terrible for me to even say that. But I started this book in 2019, and then as I was drafting it, I was watching all of this
Mm.
stuff happen
Yeah.
that made like not even just Trump being president. That changed a lot of stuff too, where from between 2013 and then 2016 happening where he became president, it's like, oh, this is a different world than I thought we were living in.
Right.
Going from Obama to Trump is it's different, let's say.
Mm.
And there was a shift that I was very aware as I was writing it, that all of a sudden my book is a period piece because I'm not going to be mentioning Me Too. I'm not going to be mentioning George Floyd or any of the police violence and brutality. I'm not going to be mentioning any of this stuff, despite I do mention it in that passage, but not in the sense where now all of us have a list of names in our minds and stuff of people to whom this stuff has happened and who are now um, symbols for this movement in a sense, um, in a way that wasn't completely the case. It had started back then where we were talking about it, but the conversations have shifted, and I didn't want trying to adapt this in a way where I'm talking about Trump being president and now, the rise of, fascism and bigotry and all of this stuff it's a different book, and then it becomes this weird then it turns into I'm on some kind of big political mission
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah. And that wasn't, you had to stay focused. You had to
yeah,
stay.
I'm describing a thing that actually happened to me in my little world, and I
Yeah.
didn't have that. So a lot of that stuff, this racial stuff, sexual stuff, all of these things that make him uncomfortable and make him f afraid that, he's being perceived as a wolf in sheep's clothing, um, is personal baggage stuff that it's not necessarily his fault. Some of it might be in his thought patterns and stuff, but also it's cultural stuff that he just growing up and exposure to different things. Um, I tried to uh, get at that a little bit too. If you start looking at, there's a lot of like cultural um, touchstones in the States that you don't realize. There's a lot of like YouTube essays and stuff on these kinds of things now because people love unearthing this kind of stuff, but where it's like, oh, the sinister origins of this
Yeah.
story or song or logo or something. And there are some of those things scattered throughout the book, too, where it's kind of always there. And without having to reveal a bunch of stuff that happened in his childhood, because there's not concrete stuff that I can point to that really gave me those anxieties or anything. It was really just the voices amplified a thing that it's already uncomfortable to live in the States and to be aware of its bloody history.
Well, you know, it's much better to be aware than to be in denial.
Yes, absolutely. Oh,
So I think
absolutely.
being aware is a good start. I think being aware is a good start. And I want to say that I was being generous to Alex when I said, well, he's not racist. You're not racist. You know, and you were right to respond by depends on how you define racist. And
Yeah.
it's true. That's also why I just define psychosis. I feel like when you're talking about something, you want to be clear on what you're talking about. And you might know the name Ibram X. Kendi.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
an American
Anti-racist. Yeah.
writer, anti-racist
Yeah.
campaigner. And one of the things he said that's always stayed with me is that you can't not be racist growing up in a racist society.
Yeah.
And I like to use Trinidad as a reference point because Trinidad is multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial. We've got a really tiny white population, probably less than 1%.
Mhm.
And there are people who say, well, you know, black and brown people can't be racist. And I think if you define racism to do, and you limit it to talking about the power dynamic and you limit it to talking about the parts of the world where white people have more power,
Mhm.
which is, say, Europe, the so-called West, um, then that might be true. But if you have a broader definition of racism, anybody can be racist.
Sure.
And
Right.
I feel as if, though I grew up in the Caribbean, though I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, I would say that there is racism in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's not only anti-Black racism, which
Mhm.
is real. Um, you know, I think there is, it may manifest in different ways, but it's there. And
Yeah.
I would say I grew up in a racist society, and I would say that means that I too must have, even though the more conscious of it I am, the more I can fight it, I must have imbibed some racism that infiltrates my my consciousness and the way I engage with the world.
Yeah. Right.
And some of that, and I think a very simple form and a very common form that a lot of people can relate to is as a female person growing up in, say, the 70s or the 80s. And it's much less true now, I believe. But so much of the beauty standard that we were exposed to was the Eurocentric beauty standard.
Mhm.
You go to the hairdresser, and there's Cosmopolitan and there's Vogue, and yeah, there are Black magazines too. And over the decades, I think more and more, the beauty of people of color and Black people, um, in particular, it's more present. So hopefully the younger generations are able to love and embrace themselves,
Yeah.
and not uh um and not be sort of hung up on this more Eurocentric standard of beauty, and understand that there's beauty in that whole wide range of our species, and it's um not that I just hope we're in a better place now.
Yeah.
In some ways, at least in that regard. In some ways, as you can say, it feels like we're moving backwards. White supremacy is on the rise. You've got crazy people like Curtis Yarvin. You
Yeah.
know that name? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to go, I don't want to segue too far off, but a friend of mine, I hope she'll be willing to do an author interview as the months go by. She literally wrote a book in 2018, and you've just got to ask yourself, did Curtis Yarvin read this book?
Oh man.
you know,
Jeez.
I mean, she was writing a book that included the subject of racism and white supremacy. Um, and that to some extent, it felt so far-fetched, I'm sure, to a lot of readers.
Mhm.
But now hearing the things that Curtis Yarvin has come up with, you think, oh my God. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to I Hear You Watching. I think what you're trying to say here, if I get you wrong, when I asked you what you were trying to achieve, you're saying that you wanted to also speak to some of the black-white tension and some of the white discomfort that is real, even though it might not be the point.
Well, and
And
only honestly,
yeah,
my aim was only my own because
okay,
I don't. There isn't enough talk. Even now, there's still not enough talk about it because I think everybody's terrified of saying the wrong thing or coming across the wrong way. So if you see something that somebody else is doing that, kind of crosses the line or whatever, the thing to do is to make yourself look like the person who would never do that by
right.
vilifying them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not helpful because it's not
Agreed.
the thing that happened that kind of surprised me the most about this was I thought that I was putting out all this disgusting specific stuff about myself. And man, your brain goes some wild places or something. And from the first person who read it, including my wife, to,
Uh-huh.
up to the last person who read it, is like, man, this is brutally honest. For this thing that I've never experienced, hearing voices, I identified so much with so many of this part and this part and this part,
Fantastic. Yeah.
and I've had so many people express like a sympathy with even specifically those thoughts and those
Right.
kinds of intrusive
Yeah.
thoughts where you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have chronic intrusive thoughts or anything because that's yet another, diagnosable thing, the label and all that stuff. But I think we all have intrusive thoughts of some kind in some way that are our fears manifesting or, hey, careful, don't,
Yeah.
do faux pas or whatever that kind of on in the best conditions, they keep us. That's what how we have a society and people remain like friendly with each other.
Mhm, mhm.
And then worst case, you turn into an extremely anxious person, and then it eats you alive from the
And I
inside.
think this conversation that we're having here speaks a little bit to the solutions for a lot of the polarization that we have
Yeah,
on
maybe.
practically every subject. I mean, you can take something seemingly as innocent as breastfeeding and realize that a subject like that has
Oh,
been politically polarized as well.
oh
It
yeah,
doesn't need to be.
yeah.
And I think it's because we've started to think that everything is a debate. But how
Right.
about it could be a discussion, it could be a conversation. We could be open to the fact that when we have a conversation, we're going to learn something from each other.
Yeah. That would be
Um,
a great idea. That sounds really nice.
yeah. But I don't know. I think Steve Bannon, of all people, says
Mhm.
that politics follows culture.
Yeah,
And strangely enough, even this little conversation that we're having here that we're planning to share with our readers on Substack, um, this is culture. Culture is, what are we talking about? What are we reading? How are we discussing and understanding the world that we live in?
right.
And in a sense, maybe maybe this is maybe this is one of our small contributions towards suggesting to people that there is another way.
Yeah, yeah, right.
There is another way. We can
Maybe.
disagree sharply, but we can have a conversation.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
like that. We'll see.
yeah, but the trouble is, I'm gonna have to find some guests that I disagree with.
Yeah, sure. Well,
Because I
sure.
think we agree on a lot. Um,
I will I'd like to speak to this just one more because it occurred
yeah.
to me too that one of the things as I was writing this, like I said, that was something that I was most terrified to broach because the sexuality thing is that can be written off as just me. If anybody thinks it's weird, that's me. That's a me problem. Everybody's got something different that does it for them or, whatever. So we accept that. But it's the racial thing is so polarizing and such a hot issue because it like not that sexuality can't be used to oppress, but it's a different thing. And one of the things that surprised me the most is that um, I had a lot of different beta readers check out the book, and I had a lot of different readers since publishing in 2023. Um, some people of color who are friends of and family, some people who are complete strangers, and the only people who told me you should dial this part back, or not just the racial stuff, there could be other words or whatever or things. The only people that told me to dial it back were white. And I thought I thought that was really interesting. That is not something I expected. And it was only three of them that I can point to, one of whom was a lifelong sufferer from Tourette's syndrome. And she was talking about how you and I understand the experience of intrusive thoughts, but I don't think anybody else would get it.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because all of the other beta readers, she was relatively a stranger to me. This was kind of our only exchanges, excuse me. Um, but everybody else was sending me messages saying, "Oh my God, this is so me." And it's like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
there was another person saying, "Look, we've been through all this stuff. 2020 happened. Now I think she read it in 2021 or 2022, and she said, we just don't need this right now. This
Hmm.
shouldn't, you don't
Yeah.
need to throw fuel on the fire."
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a part of me that felt maybe she's right because, like I said, it wasn't it wasn't ambitious for me. I still don't necessarily see it as ambitious.
Mhm.
The ambition ticks a point each time one individual says, "Oh man, this
Yeah.
really spoke to me," or "this felt real or brutally honest." But it's like the line between ambition and career suicide is very thin,
Hmm.
especially now, like you said. Uh, but in direct response to that feedback I got saying you should take this out, specifically that word, um, there was somebody else, a member of my family who's black, who read it and who said, you know, I don't know about that person. I don't know where they're coming from, but I have to say, these kinds of intrusive thoughts that you guys as white people have, it's not a secret. We know. Like
Yeah,
you're not covering anything up or saving face by not
right,
putting it in there.
yeah.
Like we're aware.
Again, this reminds me of my friend who wrote that book. And she said the only people who told her it's racist, don't write that, were white people.
Yeah,
And black people were like, yeah, white people would absolutely do that. We could see this happening.
totally. Yeah,
It just feels honest.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm loving this conversation. I'm loving this conversation. Um, I'm shocked that we only have 6 minutes left.
Oh man.
But I would love for you to do your third reading.
Oh, sure.
And I don't actually know what that third reading is going to be about. You might have told me. I know I'm coming across as a really bad host here.
No, 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 it's all
I
good.
just trust you, right? And I know I've read the whole book and I
Well,
trust
now you know where that trust gets you.
I'm going to edit, or do I? Or do I? Maybe I don't. Maybe we won't. We're going to discuss this. And we're going to
Hey,
keep all
whatever,
this in, okay? Because
whatever
I'm
you
a
want to
lousy
do.
editor.
This is your show. I'm just the guest.
Let's have some fun.
Um,
Okay, let's
yeah.
let's let's hear this. Let's hear this piece.
So this last one is we've kind of gone backwards through the three because the first one was a bit further into the book, then the second one was a little bit less far, and now this is the beginning of him signing up for the website, the
Okay.
hookup website.
Oh yes. I
So this
remember
gets to the
I did love this scene, yeah.
this is the uh so this is when he's making that decision to sign up for this, get out of his shell. He's kind of coming face to face with that discomfort. He's still thinking about that moment in which he thought he was being watched. His neighbor, he thought he was caught, through the window, even though the blinds were down and stuff. His first red flag. And so he's thinking about that kind of stuff. So I didn't miss anything else. Oh, also, if you have your speakers on and other people are around, this goes not in the same way.
Not
Let's
child
just
friendly.
yeah.
Do not play
Yeah.
this at work.
Right. Yeah, although hopefully you already turned if that's the case, you're already aware. Um, at home, Gavin's words echo in my mind. The internet's a big place, a lot of people in the same boat. Los Angeles is a gigantic boat carrying 4 million passengers. I can't be the only lonely person among them. They're all 50-year-old married men, butts in imaginary Eli. Looking up dating sites, I think this isn't what normal people do, especially not people in their mid-20s. Search the internet for a partner. Again, this was 2013, so I feel like a creep in a sea of creeps. I remember the stranger's laugh out my window. Between me doing something in my own home and my neighbor watching me do it, who is the real creep? Imaginary Gavin says, your neighbor's a perv. But I was the one masturbating. If I'd just been cooking dinner or reading a book while they watched, the question of which one of us is the perv wouldn't come up at all. I once watched a clip of a woman on a couch having sex with a standing man, and I couldn't stop staring at his legs. I masturbated in the opportune intervals, close-ups of the penetration, faces and sounds she made in time with the movements, the way her breasts bounced and her nipples traced circles like the eyes of a cartoon character after a blow to the head. Then I'd see a wide shot of him standing there. His belly didn't bulge, but clearly gathered at the bottom. His thighs were round like hogbacks, and his calves curved like fish bellies to the shifting egg sacs of his ankles. His feet settled flat on the floor like fistfuls of dough. These visions triggered words: homunculus, hominid, biped, organism. His legs tensed, almost breathed, muscles and tendons boiling as he pumped fertilizer into the receptive female, and I imagined the narration of an old science newsreel. Behold man's strongest link to the rest of the animal kingdom, Porno erectus. Here we see a specimen in the act of procreation. The thing pulled itself out of the woman, and its genital wand bobbed the way a parade horse's does when it pisses on a street. Then it squished its doughy pads on the hardwood floor to position itself at the other end of the couch and held the woman's head. The tendons moving in its hands looked like bat wings, and I stopped the video. Most people don't see it this way. I am not a porno erectus. I'm just human. My desire for sex doesn't make me gross or a pervert or a bad person. Everybody pees. Everyone masturbates. Why am I ashamed of these things? I thought of signing up myself, imaginary Gavin says. He's my age, and this is something people our age are doing now. But I need to find a place where sexual interest is stated up front so I can get out of my head and meet someone eye to eye. Where are all the open, honest people on the internet? After more research and hesitation, I choose adultxxxplaydate.com. The membership fee is discounted for the first 6 months with a money back guarantee. If you don't get laid, we don't get paid. I don't bother to read the fine print on how they handle those claims. A pop-up asks if I'm 18. Then I enter my email address, one I created for use on the site, and another pop-up interrupts to tell me Sherry is waiting him, lonely and ready to party, along with a video image of a woman using a green vibrator that I don't watch long enough to know if it's an animated GIF pre-recorded or piped in from somewhere else. Maybe Sherry's really there, but she definitely isn't waiting for me. Login opens a welcome marquee, followed by two banner ads for sexy singles in the area and a website for discounted sex toys. The image is a whip on display behind multicolored butt plugs lined up in a rainbow. Below that is the real content. Rows and rows of profiles and a number of ways to filter, categorize, and search. It's a gridwork wilderness of fanning feathers, distending vocal sacs, poses, and dances, the human animal expressing its completely natural desire for physical companionship. And we'll see if that works out.
Wow, that was just, I have to say too in closing that you read your work really beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you really do. Um, there's so much that could be said about that extract
Hmm.
from so many different angles. Um, on one hand, it's graphic, but it doesn't feel gratuitous. It doesn't feel like pornographic, like you just wanted to put this in. It feels purposeful.
Hmm.
You know, it helps us to understand Alex better because this is how he's responding to what he's seeing. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the essence of that scene for me is sex is something we need. And the way our society is set up now, this is the crazy way in which we're seeking it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's yeah, again, it's a scene that it's simple. It could be read as funny. It could be read as wild. It could be read as graphic. It might even be read by some readers as unnecessary, but I think it does a lot of work. I think it does a lot of heavy lifting. And again, back to what, back to that phrase, it's brutally honest.
Hmm.
This is how it is. This is how it is. And I think you kind of show off a little bit your skill as a writer there. By making something as mundane and even crass as what he's doing interesting to read.
Well, thank you. Good. Mission
Yeah,
accomplished.
yeah. So my only regret is that we don't have time to explore that extract because it's time to wrap up.
Sure.
Um, so folks, I hope you're excited to read I Hear You Watching for whatever personal reason you might want to. I know for me, I just really wanted to know what's it really like to hear voices because of all the things in I Hear You Watching, the experience of hearing voices is the one that is least relatable to most of us. Yeah. So we're just going to end with a few fun questions for Zachary. Um, Zach, well, actually, this is a serious question. It's not a fun question. The fun question is the last one. Do you ever ask yourself how your story might have ended differently if it wasn't for your wonderful wife, Louise?
Yeah.
Um, your parents were supportive and you moved to France.
Yeah. Yes, I do think about that, and there's nothing definitive. There's something that I talk about in the afterword too, where I feel like having found Louise and having this long distance relationship building up to a move to France out of LA. I'd been in LA for 10 years. There was sort of a feeling of I finally had something to lose in that moment that could be potentially another factor in this flare up of the voices and the paranoia and worrying that this defensive, securing of my own borders um, and privacy and all that stuff, feeling like I finally had something that could be taken away. So it's possible that it never would have happened even if that weren't the case. But I think it would have just because of the my thought patterns and the trajectory that I was on, and my job and that kind of stuff too, all these factors that are addressed in the book. Um, if I hadn't, the slight spoiler at the end, although anything in this book, the first spoiler is on the back, it says, this guy's hearing voices, none of these people are real.
Yeah,
So this isn't Fight Club. It's not a surprise. It's a surprise to him, but so there's a lot of stuff that when I talk about spoilers, they don't really. I'm still alive, so that isn't
yeah,
part of the ending either. Um, he does at the end, he visits an apartment called a micro studio, which is it's a building, a long building that's been divided into tiny box apartments that are very small. You can touch the walls when you reach out, and it's a few steps from front to back. It's got a toilet in the shower to save space. And this is exactly an apartment that I visited in that moment to think that I was saving money to move to France. I would thought, well, I need to change apartments anyway, and I might as well save some money. And hopefully it would be less haunted than my previous apartment. And so I probably would have maybe wound up in some place like that, and maybe it would have been, slightly better, at least to change scenery, be even closer to people, be closer to my neighbors, and hear each other through the walls in a way that I hadn't before because I thought I could, but I wasn't actually hearing as much as real stuff as I thought. And just needing to force myself to be confronted with uh, the people around me in a way that moving to France, meaning moving to Paris specifically, where I didn't have a car anymore. LA is all about cars. Everybody's in their metal bubble on the freeway, yelling about all the other metal bubbles in their way when all of those are full of other people
right.
doing their things. And whereas in Paris, you get on the metro and everybody's shoulder to shoulder and it's all people.
Hmm.
Um, it's a lot of people in your way, and you don't, or at least I didn't think of it that same way. It didn't feel like traffic. It just felt like we're all going about our lives together, um, and on the bus and all that stuff, which I really loved because it made me uncomfortable in different ways because I had never been confronted with so many people and out on the sidewalk and all of this stuff. LA can be very isolating that way. It's very easy to live in your own bubble there. Um, Whereas here, that bubble was popped and jostled all the time. But it was exposure therapy, and I thought it was really good. So it's possible that I could have maintained that bubble even longer. Um, Worst case scenario, he talks about, there's a specific chapter when he's followed in the streets, or at least he thinks he's being followed. And he imagines that he doesn't want to lead them back to his home because then they'll know where he lives.
Yeah,
And so he thinks, well, I could just keep walking until they give up. And there is a part of me that, excuse me, has to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who have this experience and decide to keep walking, and they are still walking. And
right. Yeah, you described them earlier on as well. Some of
yeah,
the people that you've met
yeah,
in these communities. Um, so I did gather from something you'd said before that there were aspects to moving to France that you think contributed to your healing
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So I think I'll leave it there because if you follow Zachary's Substack, you will have the opportunity to actually chat with him directly. He has um, chat opportunities both in the comments and in a dedicated chat section
Yeah.
where you can actually ask him directly anything you like. And he's been really, really, as I say, generous and open in answering some pretty personal questions about what his experience really was like and how much of what happened to Alex really happened to him. Um, so you guys listening here can carry on this conversation with Zachary on Substack. And I just have one more question for you, Zach.
Yeah,
Who's
sure.
the real Zachary Dillon? Sum yourself up in 3 words.
Yeah, in three
Something,
words.
tell us something that people who know you well won't disagree with.
Well, I thought about this when you sent me this this question. Um, and the answer that I came up with is 3 words, but it's kind of all one thing.
Okay.
And it is too much information. So
Oh my gosh. On that note, on that note, guys, get your copy of I Hear You Watching. You're going to enjoy it. You really will. And I think in some ways it's too much information, but it's also information you won't get anywhere else.
thank you. That's a charitable reading of it.
Enjoy, guys. Thank you so much, Zachary. You've been brilliant. You've been amazing.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here, Amanda. Thank you.
Take care, Zachary.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.